All right, what's going on, guys? Reed Orlando here with another episode of Reed SPN Sports Podcast. No basketball talk today. I can't deal with that. I'm going to have a fucking heart attack if I keep talking about the Knicks. But we're going to talk about some fights this weekend on Saturday. Yes, this is the first time that Rochester has gotten blessed in a very long time. They are having a fight headlined by Kevin Lee and Rafael Dos Anjos. This is Kevin Lee's debut at 170 pounds, aka welterweight. So we'll get into that breakdown later, but just wanted to go over some MMA news because there is a lot to discuss. First things first, Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway, official for UFC 240 in Edmonton. That is the only fight announced so far. So here's the deal with this. So I said in my last podcast that Frankie Edgar might fight Alexander Volkanovski, or Volkanovski might jump up and fight Max Holloway after that impressive win over Jose Aldo. But it looks like they're actually blessing Frankie Edgar here for the first time in a very long time. He's getting the shot against Max Holloway. That should be a very good fight. I'm just glad to see Frankie is getting the shot. He's gotten screwed over in multiple title shots. So let's just go over the list right now. So he was supposed to fight Conor after he beat Chad Mendes, but he wound up fighting Aldo because Conor moved up. Then he lost to Aldo. Then he was supposed to fight Max, but Frankie pulled originally with something with his face, with his orbital. And then the next time they were scheduled to fight, Max pulled out with an injury. I believe it was a knee injury, if I'm not mistaken. So then Frankie stepped up on less than 2 weeks' notice to fight Brian Ortega. And we saw what happened after that. But then the month after that, at Fight Night Atlantic City, he came back and beat Cub Swanson. So Frankie Edgar is finally getting what he deserved. I know Alexander Volkanovski's upset about it. But what are you going to do? Frankie's paid his due diligence. He's paid all the dues. I think he really does deserve a title shot right now. Very happy to see that fight. That'll be a good one. We don't have any other fights announced, like I said, so we'll see what happens. It could be a very stacked card if that's the main event already. Now we had Ryan Hall versus Darren Elkins. That is official for Fight Night Sacramento. Darren Elkins trains at Team Alpha Male, so it is kind of a hometown fight for him since Team Alpha Male is based out of Sacramento. But what's interesting about this is no one's really willing to fight Ryan Hall because Ryan Hall is a leg lock specialist, and we saw what he did to BJ Penn the last time. A lot of fighters don't want to fight him because they don't want to risk a permanent injury. We've seen a lot of leg lockers that have created a bad stigma around MMA, like Rousimar Palhares. That's really the main one. Rousimar Palhares, when he would get leg locks, he was a leg lock specialist. He really would hold on to it for too long. And the one person that really blueprinted on how to be a good leg locker was Alan Belcher. Alan Belcher was able to beat him. But that's why a lot of people don't want to fight Ryan Hall, because he is a leg locker. So it's good to see he's fighting a ranked opponent in Darren Elkins. So it really just depends. If Ryan Hall's able to pass this test, let's see if he can get a top 10 opponent, because we've never seen his style used as effectively as it is today. Like I said, Rousimar Palhares. We've had a lot of other great jiu-jitsu practitioners. Now we have Gary Tonin over at One Championship. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him versus Darren Elkins. If he's able to submit him, or if he's able to control him on the ground for 3 rounds, then undoubtedly he is a top 12 contender. Now, his striking is not great at all, but he's a specialist, and he's a jiu-jitsu specialist, and that's what he came here into the UFC to do, is to submit people. He's not here to throw it on his feet, to throw in his hands. When he fought Artem Lobov in that tough, I don't know, I'm trying to think what tough it was. He was able to control him from the ground, and Artem Lobov really had no answers for it. So that's going to be a very interesting fight. Another newsworthy headline I saw was Jordan Burrows is willing to compete in MMA after the 2020 Olympics. Now, for those of you that don't know, Jordan Burrows is a 4-time Olympic champ. His junior and senior year in college, he went undefeated. In his senior year, he won the Hodge Trophy. He's a 3-time All-American, like I said, national champ and a Hodge winner. And Jordan Burrows is, pound for pound, one of the best wrestlers on planet Earth right now. We saw in the Beat the Streets match versus Ben Askren that there is levels to this shit. Ben Askren has the best MMA wrestling right now in the world, him and Khabib. But in terms of pure wrestling, I mean, you saw what Jordan Burrows did to him. There's just levels to it, and Jordan Burrows dominated him in their grappling bout. So that would be really interesting. I would love to see Jordan Burrows fight in the UFC, but we'll wait and see until 2020 after the Olympics. Now, Neil Magny is out of his fight, and this was the co-main event, by the way, for UFC Rochester, which is this weekend. He's out with this fight with Vicente Luque for testing positive for a banned substance. He was on the UFC Unfiltered podcast. And he was very open about it. Neil Magny's not a physically dominating guy. He's never tested positive before. This isn't EPO that he tested positive for. It was an anabolic steroid. So I'm just assuming it's another tainted supplement. He said he's been taking a lot of CBD, so maybe something cross-contaminated with that. Who really knows? But I don't expect this to be a long suspension. But you never know after the whole TJ Dillashaw thing. You never really know what these fighters are taking. So we'll see. But he looked to be pretty open about it. And that fight is off. Vicente Luque, yeah, they haven't found a replacement opponent for him, so we'll see what happens. It looks like that fight's off. Now, there's some big news. We had Tony Ferguson versus Cowboy, official for UFC 238 in Chicago. The winner of that fight should definitely fight the winner of Khabib versus Poirier. Now, Khabib and Poirier, when exactly are they fighting? Let me look that up. Khabib versus... Oh, is that taking place in Abu Dhabi? I think it's taking place in Abu Dhabi. That'll be interesting. Yeah, UFC. Yeah, it's UFC 239. Let me see. No, this is at the T-Mobile Arena. Is it 239? I don't know. It's showing me all sorts of different things. But that fight's official. That should be a really good fight. Honestly, right now, Tony's opening up as the favorite. Honestly, if you're asking my personal opinion, I would bet Cowboy in this fight. He's been red hot recently. Tony's been dealing with a lot of issues. We haven't seen him fight since October. I think the time is now for Cowboy to regain supremacy in the lightweight division. I think that he really could legitimately win the belt. Like I said, we'll see what happens with him and Tony. But if he wins that fight, he should be next for a title shot. At this point, I'm ruling Conor McGregor out. Nothing's been announced. He's still retired at the moment. So I'm not even entertaining Conor McGregor at this point because he's irrelevant in that division. The four that are really relevant right now, Dustin Poirier, Khabib, Tony, and Cowboy at the moment. Those are the four best lightweights in the world. I mean, we saw what Cowboy did to Ally Quinta. That was so impressive. And his length and just his overall size is really hard to deal with that lightweight. That's why he was so dominant for so long until he obviously got TKO'd by Rafael Dos Anjos. But, I mean, Cowboy's right back in the mix. Since having his kid, he's been really focused, and he's ready to go, Cowboy. So I'm excited for that fight. Aaron Pico moves to Jackson Wink. I think that's an appropriate move for him. He was training with Antonio and AJ McKee. I'm drawing a blank on what that fight camp is, but I know it's Antonio McKee was his head coach. He is moving over to Jackson Wink. Now, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be still training with Freddie Roach at Wildcard. But I assume he will. I assume he'll split time between Jackson Wink and Eddie Roach, or Freddie Roach will come out there and they'll fly him out. So we'll see, but I think it's an appropriate move for Aaron Pico. Getting knocked out twice in your career so far isn't a great look, even though he's had some super impressive wins. But I really think that that was a good move for him. He's a young fighter, and he can really develop under the tutelage of Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn. A lot of people are saying that, oh, Jackson Wink's not the same as it used to be. It still is. They're still one of the most dominant gyms in MMA overall, especially in all time. They're definitely one of the most dominant gyms. So I think it's a very good move for Aaron Pico. Let's restart. Let's find the proper game plan to utilize all my skills. I think that his best two skill sets, which are pretty well known, are his boxing and his wrestling. I'd like to see him use his wrestling more because he is a world-class wrestler. And if people forget, he was a couple of points away from making the Olympic team, I believe, at 19 years old, which is unbelievably impressive. He skipped his college career and went right into the international wrestling circuit. So he's got to use his wrestling more. Eddie Bravo was talking about on Rogan's podcast a while ago when he was training. He was like, dude, you got to just use your wrestling, and that's it. Ground and pound everyone, control them from top. That's how you're going to win. And I think that's how Aaron Pico can win in the future. And I think that Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn will use what he's best at and will implement it in a game plan to use it effectively against opponents. Now, Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz, official for UFC 241. Anthony Pettis has been talking shit about Nate Diaz, and Duke Roufus came out and said that stylistically it's a good matchup for Anthony Pettis, which I think it is, but it's hard to deal with Nate Diaz's reach. This will be at welterweight, by the way. So that should be a really good fight. I'm very intrigued to see that fight. I'm curious to see what happens. We haven't seen Nate Diaz fight in about 3 years. So let's see what happens there. But the one thing about the Diaz that I will give them is ring rust doesn't really apply to them. They're always ready to go. They're always ready to fight. And ring rust isn't a thing with them and a couple of other fighters like Dominic Cruz. So, yeah, I think that Nate Diaz will be ready to go. I don't think we're going to see signs of ring rust when he fights Anthony Pettis. Now, for the main event, for UFC Fight Night Rochester, we have Kevin Lee versus Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, Lee hasn't fought since December, since losing to Aljamain. This is his first fight at welterweight, so I expect him to physically look better and healthier. That weight cut at lightweight was rough for him. There were a couple times where he was very close to missing weight. He said it multiple times, that weight cut is hard, and he was looking to get up to 170 pounds after he won the belt, which he never did at lightweight. So don't rule out the possibility of him moving back down to lightweight. I just think that he's has a better chance of getting to the belt at welterweight at the moment, especially fighting a ranked opponent, Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, what is Rafael Dos Anjos ranked right now? I'll find that out. Oh, he's ranked number 3 right now, so he's very high in that division. So I think a win for Kevin Lee here would propel him right to the top of that division. A lot of things have to happen at welterweight for him to get a title shot. He'll probably get 2 fights, maybe 3 fights if he beats Rafael Dos Anjos. But let's continue with the breakdown. He comes into fights overconfident at times. I expect him to be more focused because of how big of an opportunity this is, fighting the number 3 ranked opponent there. He used his jab very effectively versus Al, which I can see him using effectively in this fight with a 7-inch reach advantage. I think he could definitely keep Rafael Dos Anjos at bay with his jab because he does have such a distinct reach advantage. And Kamaru Usman used it really well against Rafael Dos Anjos, and I believe he had a 5 or 6-inch reach advantage. So Kevin Lee loves to throw the kick to the body and the head. With his left leg when his opponent throws and extends on that right hand. It leaves the left side of the body open. He really dings that body shot and that left high kick well. Wasn't able to land a high kick effectively on Aljamain, but he hit him with some really nice body shots. He controls the cage typically until he feels some power like he did with Al, and then he backs up and looks to reset. RDA can hit him with some power and can get him up on his back foot. Now, Kevin Lee doesn't fight as well on his back foot, which we saw with Al, and that's what Ray Longo and Matt Serra were trying to do with, why am I drawing a blank? The fucking garbage truck just came by and it made me lose focus, ADD. But yeah, that was the whole thing with Al versus Kevin Lee, was that once Al was able to get him on his back foot, Kevin Lee wasn't really able to do anything, and he was kind of stagnant in his offense. Al was so successful with Lee because he kept him guessing, taking angles to throw Lee's timing and balance off. Now, Kevin Lee was able to land some really effective takedowns in that fight. He landed 3 in the first 2 rounds, I believe, or in the first 3 rounds, and he was able to pass his guard and everything. Now, RDA has to gain Lee's respect, or he will push the pace and will control the cage. He has to get him backing up. Overall, I'd say this, that one of Kevin Lee's best attributes as a grappler is his body lock. If he's able to get that body lock on you, you will get taken down, which he showed against Aljamain. And Aljamain wrestled in junior college at Nassau Community College, and Nassau Community College is no joke in terms of junior college wrestling. Long Island in general has phenomenal wrestlers. If Lee takes you down, he will advance in position. The last 3 fights, he scored 10 takedowns with 16 grappling advances in those fights, which is insane, which means that he had tried to advance 16 times, whether he passed the guard, passed again, went to side control, went to half guard. He was always looking to pass. He does fade in later rounds, I'd say. Will his cardio be better at welterweight? I'd say it should be better at welterweight because he's not going to be depleted with the weight cut. So he's still going to have to cut some weight to make 70 pounds, but it's not going to be like cutting down to 155. He gets that 15-pound cushion, and I think he's definitely going to benefit from this, especially cardiovascularly. So he was able to take down Al down multiple times. I expect him to take RDA down a couple of times. If he gets RDA's back, he is in some trouble. Most of the time, Kevin Lee, once he takes you down, if he gets your back, like we saw with Michael Chiesa, you are in a world of shit. I believe he took Tony's back too, but Tony was able to get out of it somehow, and so was Al in his last fight. But most of the time, if Kevin Lee gets your back, he will cinch in that rear naked choke. He's got so much control and so much power once he gets that body lock with his legs. It's really over from there. In the later rounds, his hands drop more, and Al was able to really find his range with that right hand and stole rounds 4 and 5, I think. Now, RDA is coming off back-to-back losses over Kamaru Usman and Kobe, who are both champions. Well, Colby Covington's an interim champ, but they're still both champions and had a real problem with their pressure wrestling. In that first round against Colby Covington just went reckless. He came in very explosive, threw a couple of shots, and then shot instantly for a takedown, and that was really the story of the whole fight with him and Colby Covington. Now, like I said, he is giving up 7 inches of reach, so he has to get in the pocket and to be able to throw effective strikes. If he sits on the outside, it's Kevin Lee all day, but also in the pocket, you give yourself more of an opportunity to get taken down by Kevin Lee. So it's really pick your poison here for Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, Rafael Dos Anjos is a black belt, but he has had trouble with the high-level wrestlers in his last 2 fights. And in all honesty, can the UFC give RDA somewhat of a favorable matchup? Now, I'm picking Kevin Lee to win this fight, but RDA, you've been gone against 3 stud wrestlers in your last 3 fights after beating Robbie Lawler. They're not favorable matchups for RDA. At lightweight, sure. But these welterweights are big boys, and once they get a hold of your legs, you're going down, which we saw with Usman and we saw with Colby. So I think that this definitely puts Rafael Dos Anjos at a disadvantage. He has to get Kevin Lee on his back foot. He has to push the pace here. Otherwise, if Kevin Lee keeps walking forward, he keeps controlling the cage, it's Kevin Lee all day here. I think that he has crisper boxing than Kevin Lee, but like I said, has to close the distance or he'll be thrown in the wind. So that should be a really good fight. I'm very intrigued by it. I think Kevin Lee is going to win. I think he's going to be able to control him from the bottom. I think he'll be able to pass his guard a couple times. I think he'll just be able to control him from bottom because overall in the standing, I give Rafael Dos Anjos the edge. However, with the 7-inch reach advantage of Kevin Lee, it kind of neutralizes because Kevin Lee can keep him at bay with his jab. It can really control the range there. So I'm picking Kevin Lee to win this fight. Just think he'll take him down a couple times, control him, be able to land some effective shots. And if he gets him backed up against the cage, he'll be able to take Rafael Dos Anjos down more. He'll be able to land some effective strikes in the clinch. So Kevin Lee all day in this fight. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to this one. Gonna get into more news segments. I like breakdowns, but news is just quicker, and I can talk about it more off the top of my head more. So thank you for listening to ESPN Sports Podcast. We'll try to get a post-fight show going for the fights on Sunday or Monday, so I'll keep you up to date with that. But thank you for listening, guys. Appreciate it.